Story 1. Can horror movies invite an entity into your house? When the movie, Smile, first came out, and everyone was saying they couldn't even finish it, and how it was so disturbing, I thought, challenge accepted. I love horror, and was excited when it was released to some streaming platforms. So, when my mom, sister, and I were watching it, a random family picture fell off our fireplace and onto the floor. It was kind of freaky, considering it had been up there for almost 3 years, and had never fallen before, but you know, gravity exists, so whatever. Then, while my mom and sister were in the kitchen, I was in my spot in the corner of the room in an armchair, when the TV just shuts off by itself. The remotes were on the couch with nobody nearby. It wasn't a power outage or anything, and there was nothing wrong with the TV when we turned it back on. My mom then got way too freaked out, and told me I couldn't watch that movie in the house anymore. But the truth is, I haven't at all. And that movie, we never even finished halfway through the movie. Then, weird stuff has been happening. I have started to hear footsteps walk up the basement, and the footstep comes into the kitchen. But my stepdad was down there, so I assumed it was him. I walked into the kitchen to our medicine cabinet, but noticed it was weird that I didn't see him anywhere. However, all the lights were still on, and the TV was on. Then, more footsteps, and my stepdad walked into the kitchen. I asked him if he had just been up here, and gone back down, but he said no. Everyone else was asleep, and he didn't hear anything. The most recent instance was, when I was sitting in my corner chair like always, and the stockings by my head started moving like someone had hit them, and made them sway. I started to tell my cat to stop, but when I looked up I saw my cat is asleep in the hallway. My mom also witnessed this. We've lived in this house for almost 4 years, and have never experienced anything. Could watching Smile have brought something into my house? Story 2. My late grandfather came for a couple of last visits, or was it? So this happened a year or two back, probably around year 2020. My grandfather on my mother's side had gotten into an accident in their home that had, unfortunately, this accident put him in a comatose state. He was rushed to the hospital, and my family was told that it was unlikely for him to survive for much longer. Everyone was distraught, and we went to visit him at the hospital. Me and my family, as well as some relatives, shared some words with him, hoping he could hear us, and the next day or so, he passed. My family went through cultural and religious ceremonies to honor him and his memories, and a day or two later, me, my father, and 2 of my cousins lowered him into his grave, alongside traditional funeral flowers and rose water, which was used to douse the body. After the funeral, later in the day at my house at night, something struck me, the fact that as soon as I entered my room, I suddenly got a whiff smell of flowers, the ones like the funeral flowers. And this smell wasn't just a hint, it was very noticeable. I was immediately struck and went to go tell my mother, and she immediately went to my room and started crying, thinking that this was a sign that my grandfather had come to visit me after his passing. And the next morning, she recalled that she had a dream of him saying his goodbyes. The smell had left by the time I woke up. The thing is, this had occurred for 4 or so days in a row, and it always only happened late evening to night. My room smelled relatively normal for the rest of the days, and my mother had a few dreams during this time of my grandfather. I didn't have dreams of him, but then again, I was, and am, an extremely heavy sleeper and rarely ever had dreams. After the 3rd day, she expressed concerns that it might be dangerous for me to sleep in my room since she had a bad feeling, while I was adamant about sleeping in my room. The problem is that I remembered that there's a religious belief of how after entering a graveyard, one must wash their feet to deter spirits from finding their way to their home, which I didn't give any thought to. Which lit the flame of anxiety on me, that if this was even my grandfather at all. Since then I've been relatively fine. So hopefully, it was him, looking over his grandson for the last couple of days he could stay. Story 3. I lived in a haunted house for 20 years. I lived in a very haunted house for 20 years of my life. I have had a medium tell me that sometimes up to 20 spirits was sensed in my house. My house was located next to a huge cemetery. Everyone who has ever stayed over in that house from my family has had experiences. My husband moved in a skeptic and moved out a believer. Some of my personal experiences include: 1. I saw a Confederate soldier standing in my bedroom. He turned, smiled at me, and vanished. 2. I and several other family members saw black shadows. 3. My back has been rubbed while I was crying, my foot has been grabbed, and my hand has been rubbed. 4. Things would go missing and turn up on the counter 6 months later. 5. You could be alone in the house, go into the basement, and hear people walking around upstairs. 6. Doorknobs would turn by themselves. 7. Heard my name called more times than I can count. I think one was fond of me because it followed me when I moved. Not at first, but I went back to see my parents and it came with me. It's not attached, it's just like the fact that we didn't bother them and they didn't bother us. Yes, they would pull pranks, but all harmless. That is how I successfully shared a house with a lot of ghosts for so long. It was built on the respect. We didn't try to run the out and they didn't scare us. I can see and hear spirits, so it was extra fun for me. I can honestly say, I have seen or heard enough to last me a lifetime. More things happened, but I think that is enough for this post. The funniest thing was, one of them used to hide my husband's car keys every time he had to be at work early. Story 4. My husband swears he heard my voice, but I was gone. I had gone out and had been gone for a couple of hours, and my husband swears he heard me singing, which is something I do often while doing a sink full of dishes. He knew I was not home as he had to pick me up from where I was. My 16-year-old son came upstairs and said, "I thought Mom was home. I thought I heard her voice a few minutes ago." So 2 people heard my voice. Any ideas on what that was? Doppelganger or what? My husband would have been in the room right next to the kitchen, so he heard it plain as day. The only reason he didn't come in there is that he was waiting on a call from me to come and get me. Story 5. Another one of my paranormal stories. When I was 16, I couldn't sleep one night. As everyone else was asleep in the house, I decided to take a ride. As I was just riding along in my automobile, and a drunk pulls out of a parking lot and hits me so hard that it flips my car 6 times. My car was on its top and on fire. I am screaming, and the seat belt would not come undone. No matter what I did, it would not come undone. Out of nowhere, a dark-headed man came to the window that I busted out with my head and tells me, "Honey, I am going to cut you out and I want you to slide out and run." I slide out, I make it about half a block, and the car exploded. At this time, the ambulances and fire trucks are there. I went back because I have glass in my head. I asked them where the guy was, and they started asking me what he looked like. He was nowhere to be found. They thought I had a head injury. I overheard them talking, saying the seatbelt was cut, not split on impact. I specifically remember fighting with that seatbelt and freaking out because it would not come undone. So my question is, where did that guy go and where did he come from? If not for him, I would have been in the car when it exploded. I am way older now and still don't know. My best guess is that he was a ghost or guardian angel. Remember to subscribe if you like stories like these. Thanks.